Good evening and welcome to this special night with George David and his comments about Rambler 100. Joining me are Rear Commodore Reeves Potts, Commodore Larry Huntington, Fleet Captain Peter Comiskey. Now let me introduce George David. A successful industrialist, he's the past CEO and chairman of United Technologies. Prominent racing sailor. He has a long record of successful campaigns in boats named for former squadron yachts, Idler and Rambler. Since the 1980s, there have been 4 Idlers and 2 Ramblers flying our Burgee. They've gotten larger and faster, from 3/4 ton to Rambler 100, which we'll hear about tonight. These yachts have won Queens and Astor Cups, the Herreshoff Medal, 2 transatlantic medals, and George was the initial recipient of the Mossbacher Trophy. Last season, Rambler won a majority of the races she was in and set 3 records. Most notably was the transatlantic race from Newport to the Lizard. Elapsed in less than 7 days with an average speed of 16.8 knots, including a 24-hour run averaging 24.3 knots. Tonight we'll hear about Rambler 100, its background, sailing characteristics, the 2011 campaign, and the capsizing in the Fastnet race. And I expect we'll hear some lessons learned on safety on the water. A fellow member since 1982, a trustee of the New York Yacht Club, George David.
Thank you very much. Those wonderful words. Very nice. Thank you. Well, Commodore Taus and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the welcome, and Commodore, thank you for the introduction. This is a wonderful club, and I've been a member for 30 years and proud and delighted for every single minute of it. Okay, this is only the second time I've talked publicly about this accident last August. It was a pretty tough accident. I think you'll see in some video footage tonight that this accident is as bad as it gets. On the other hand, though, we had 21 survivors. Every single person on the boat was a survivor, and there's some good lessons learned. Now, this is the boat, and be sure it is fun to sail this boat proportionate to its size, its power, and its speed. Anytime off the wind, that is even close reaching, broad reaching, this boat will typically go 4 to 5 knots faster than wind speed. So if it's blowing 16, the boat's going 20. If it's blowing 20, the boat's going 24. It was launched in 2008 by our fellow club member, Alex Jackson. It had a stated design goal in 2008 of being the fastest monohull ever built in the world. I think it probably is that. It's a design from 1K, the America's Cup designer, and also designer of multiple Volvo 70 boats. And understandably, this boat, which was launched as Speedboat in 2008, is based on 1K's Volvo 70 designs. Once I said in front of television that it's a 70 on steroids, which is as tight and accurate a description of this boat as can be. We made some critical changes over the 2010-2011 winter. First, the biggest one was to change the whole balance of the boat. We all felt when first sailing it that the boat was very much bow down. And that's because it had a gigantic main. It had the biggest fathead main you've ever seen. The headboard was 15 feet long at the top of the mast when we first started sailing. So we cut the mainsail size by 15% and put the jib sizes up by about 30% and rebalanced the whole boat. We also reduced the sail inventory a lot. We went from 19 to 9 sails. We went to roller furling headsails, and that was across the entire inventory, and that was in clear deference to safety on the foredeck at the speeds that this boat routinely attains. And we worked hard on reliability of systems. For example, we doubled the weights of the dagger boards, which are pretty highly loaded components, and we worked on safety throughout the entire program. The first race for us was the RORC Caribbean 600. This shot here is about an hour into that Caribbean 600 race in February of 2011. And we're going along here comfortably at 22 or 23 knots. We did end up winning this race, and we took about 4 hours off the prior 44-hour record with an average speed on course of about 15 knots. This boat is really fun to sail, especially when it starts flowing around 20. Okay, some quick words on why this boat is so fast. It's all about stability, and I'm going to ask you to bear with me just for a minute or two on just a few numbers. First is the form stability of this boat. It is a barge. Look at it carefully. It's a barge. It's 100 feet long, and it's 25 feet wide in the middle, and the 25-foot width carries the whole weight of the back of the boat. So it's really hard, like a barge, to tip it over. Second, the canting keel, which you can just make out in this image here, canted up 45 degrees relative to the boat, which means 70 degrees relative to gravity. And that has a 12.5-ton bulb, which is 18 feet down. So when it's out there, it's a lot of stability. And then there is 8 tons of water ballast on top of that, which you pump in over a 4-minute cycle to really load the rail down. And that translates to a very large sail area, because the basic thing about sailboat design is when the wind blows, the boat tips over, and the game is to make it not tip over, which means if you can do that, you have more sail and more power and more speed. And Commodore Taus has already mentioned to me I think the most remarkable things of this boat to me in the entire almost year that we sailed it was the average speed of 16.8 knots across the Atlantic last summer. We were incredibly fortunate with the weather in the third start. We had a great front that was beam reaching conditions between 18 and 28 knots for 3 days in a row. And that's how we got the almost 17 knots across the Atlantic that did include that 24-hour period with 24.3 knots. And it's hard to find words to thank the people involved enough, because there were great skills and great moments of heroism that caused every person sailing to come home. And I'll talk about that a little more as we get into lessons learned here. I said I'd give you lessons in 4 big categories, and then a few details, and we can do some questions and comments if you'd like after that. The first one is, if it is not on you, it is useless. And I think we learned that lesson in a really powerful, personal way. We need to give credit right away to the Royal Ocean Racing Club, who has a race rule, which, by the way, does not have yet, I believe, a U.S. counterpart. The RORC requires, as a general rule for all RORC races, that you will wear life jackets when it is reefed, at night, or more than 25 knots. And as we came into the Fastnet Rock, we'd been reaching along in good conditions and full main up, and everything's fine. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we got closer to Fastnet about a little bit after 5, and a reef came in and life jackets came on. And I recall reciting the RORC race rule. And in different circumstances, we might have been more casual, but the fact is that the 5 people that spent 3 hours in the water had life jackets on, courtesy of the RORC rule, because none of us regarded the conditions as especially challenging. I know the video footage makes it look dramatic, and there were 10-foot wave heights, and it was blowing 25 knots, but this is a powerful boat with a competent, serious, professional crew, and we'd been in conditions like that on multiple occasions. And I think some of us would not have had life jackets on, but for the RORC rule. Second lesson about if it's not on you, and I'd add to that, if it's not fitted correctly, these life jackets have crotch straps or thigh straps to hold them down. Otherwise, they have the risk of slipping over the back of your head, at which point they're useless. And 4 of the 5 of us in the water did not have crotch straps fitted. Might be a gender comment, but the one woman in the water did have the thigh straps fitted. And that's because, again, we didn't think it was too challenging a situation. Another one is you need to learn how to use this equipment and to do it routinely. We blow up life jackets every year. We will now, and that's the whole thing, the inflation, find where it is, find how it works automatically, and second, how it works manually. Also, spray hoods. Spray hoods save lives. I had one over my face for the entire 3 hours in the water, and about every fifth wave would break. And without spray hoods, you were going to have a really tough time not drowning. I think another one is, in the category of not on you, it's useless, is PLBs or the new AIS units, and I'll talk about those in a minute or two. These are little handheld devices, and the PLB, of course, is satellite linked. The AIS, same size, works with VHF, and it's the same thing again, transmits location position, which shows up on a chart plotter on a boat. But the notable comment was of 21 racing crew, 2 people had PLBs on them. Mick Harvey and Peter Eisler, and 19 didn't. Because again, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we weren't especially concerned. But if it's not on you, it's not going to help. Nobody had a VHF. We had it on deck, but this boat went ever so fast that nobody grabbed the VHF was there. I think a good rule is a VHF on the person of somebody, a watch captain, a navigator, or someone. Because you saw the video, multiple boats went by in the racing fleet, and the RNLI, the lifeboat, and we couldn't get their attention because we didn't have laser flares, which we carry now. We didn't have these little pocket rockets, which we carry now. The whistles we had on these spin-lock life jackets are worthless. Nobody had a VHF, and only 2 people had PLBs. So if it's not on you, and if you don't know how to use it, and if you don't use it, as in thigh straps, it's useless. So that's one big lesson. Second big lesson is do not assume that everything or anything will work, because normally it won't. And that's why it's also remarkable there are 21 survivors of this accident. The first thing is we think in our minds, at least I thought in my mind, and most of the crew did, that when you push the button on the EPIRB or the PLB, that magically the digital burst goes into the sky and the satellite gets it, and a few seconds later the helicopter is lifting off to come to get you. That's not going to happen. First thing is that these are low power devices. They're 5-watt devices. And they don't have that much reach to get to geosynchronous satellites. And so you're reliant instead on low Earth orbit, that is the ones that are 125 miles up. And they go around the Earth at a high rate of speed like that. And they're used well, it's low altitude communication systems. The geosynchronous ones are the ones that are 23,000 miles up, and you can get a signal up there maybe, but not reliably, and that's the one that's always overhead. But if you can't reach it, it can't see you. And the low Earth satellites, which can hear you, are the ones that go around and around and around. And they don't have enough bandwidth to get a digital signal. And for those of you not technically inclined, pardon these kind of complicated words, but the point is, it doesn't say, like it does in your GPS in your car, you're here. It doesn't do it. And what actually happens instead is that these low Earth orbit satellites are taking a homing signal like the old RDFs, and they're taking line of sight. Every time a satellite goes overhead, it takes a line of sight, and 2 lines of sight make a position, but it's not very accurate. And then you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as the satellites go over your head again and again. The short version of all that is it normally takes 40 minutes for a ground station to receive a signal with a position for a vessel in distress. And that's experience, 40 minutes. So if you think it's going to happen now, put a 40-minute delay in. Secondly, is that there's some difficulties with identification. It took an hour after the PLB activation, after the signal got to Valentia Island, it took 1 more hour until Coast Guard declared Mayday. And a big piece of the delay was they did not know who we were. And the reason why they didn't was because there was some confusion over the registration of the boat. All these PLBs were registered to me, but the difficulty was that Irish Coast Guard had to call headquarters in Dublin, who called the United States Coast Guard in Norfolk, Virginia, who called back Dublin, who called back Valentia Island. You had 4 phone calls. It's not somebody on the web, it's 4 phone calls. And in the course of all that, there was misunderstanding and mistransmission of who actually was the registered owner of the PLVs. Paperwork was good, but the 4 phone calls were not. So an hour and 40 minutes before anybody said Mayday. Do not assume your life jackets will work. We had 1 of 21 did not. Peter Eisler, it wouldn't work either automatically with the canister, or he couldn't blow it up either because it had a hole in it, even though it had been serviced a month before. One of our PLBs did not activate even after being serviced a month before. So a 5% failure rate. You maybe remember the comment from Jerry Smith, the wonderful dive boat captain. He said he thought we were saving our strobes for use at night. Wrong. 3 of 5 didn't work. Whistles are useless. They're not very loud, and you get water in them, and you just kind of go, I can't make the sound, but it's like, it sort of dribbles out of your mouth. Okay, so that's second big lesson. I suppose the third lesson is the one about unanticipated events. And the comment here is an inversion like this is really rare. They don't happen very often. We don't tend to think about them. And also, they don't happen very often when it is as fast as this one is. And it's worthwhile thinking about why it was so fast. This boat was upside down in less than 60 seconds. And it was horizontal in the water with the mast and the sails in the water in 15 seconds. And it was so fast because, to go back to those comments on stability, there's 8 tons of water ballast, and as soon as the hull was 90 degrees up in the air and went over 90 degrees, then it just kept on going. And 8 tons of water ballast on a residual hull at that point that weighed 19 tons was a lot. So it was over so quickly. And that has its own consequences because, of course, you can't get out of the boat. We are phenomenally fortunate that we had a half dozen people below decks, 5 of them in their bunks. And to get out of that, also realize this, the boat was 90 degrees up in 15 seconds, and think about the problems of moving around your own boat when it's on its side like that. And then when the boat's upside down, the things that you typically, because all of our safety systems that we always have in all of our boats, they're all designed to be used with the boat upright. And the expectations, you have a half an hour or something, the boat may sink, it may go down, but you've got time to think about it and do it. Not here at all. And our life rafts were in a container at the back of the boat that was open at the top and open at the front for easy, quick access, and a knife there and cut the cords and all that with the boat upright. When it's upside down, the rafts, which are buoyant, that is, they float, and they're in this box, and the box is closed at the back of the boat, you can't get them out. And the boat's heaving up and down on about a 5 or 6 foot amplitude. And same thing, grab bag and accessible. We've added since then, there's a little box right on the stern pulpit that I recommend for anybody that has got a satellite phone in it, a VHF, some laser flares, and some pocket rockets. We did not have a hydrostatic EPIRB. Most of you, I bet, have got hydrostatic EPIRBs. These are the ones that go off when the boat's more than 4 or 5 feet underwater, but think about that. It's got to be 4 or 5 feet submerged before actually the hydrostatic trigger fires. But at least if it was on the stern pulpit, we might have gone to go get it. Our 3 EPIRBs were all inside the boat because, again, it was a question of get out or drown. And nobody had time. I mean, you think you're always going to grab the EPIRB, not in this case. So that's a third lesson. I guess the fourth big lesson is, and I don't think you can practice this or anything else, it's just teamwork and calm. There were some remarkable experiences and things that happened here. I wasn't too quick to open my life jacket, and Stu Wilson did it for me. And I was kind of scrambling for this spray hood thing, and Wendy, who was behind me, got it open and put it over my head. I think Mick Harvey might have drowned. It was pretty close because he came out of the bunk and out of the boat with only his foul weather bottoms on, which of course, you know, the water gets inside those, and you're not very buoyant with the water inside heavy Musto foul weather gear. And Mick went down a couple of times, and then he actually went over the top of Jerry Kirby and Andrew Taylor who put him back on the boat. So teamwork and calm. There wasn't a moment really of anxiety. It might really surprise this entire group in this situation of such challenge. No raised voices, no panic, calm. And I'm really proud of my teammates for all of that. So let me stop there. Actually, I'm going to just do one more thing and show you a couple of these little devices. This is a recommendation. I'm not a life safety at sea person, but I recommend these. These are the new PLBs, and they're small enough you can put them in your pocket. And the rule is on us, with us offshore or rough weather, it's on your person all the time. That is satellite linked. This is the AIS, the new AIS unit, and it's like an AIS system, but what it works, it transmits a GPS, but it transmits it by VHF, that is locally, so it's line of sight and it's good for 3, 4, 5 miles, something like that when you're in the water, but it shows up on a chart plotter so people can come and find you. This is the little pocket rocket thing, and I don't have the cartridges, which are about the size of the end of my finger, because you didn't want to ship those things around the FedEx system. So I have the trigger here, but not the thing, and here's a decent whistle. So I think the most important things is on your person all the time. I really recommend that, either this or both. And by the way, these will be combined in another, I'm sure within 12 months. They're separate units right now because the Coast Guard just approved the AIS system literally a week or 10 days ago for use in the United States. But there will be, I'm sure, a combined unit, 2 functions, same unit within a few months. So with that said, let me stop there and invite questions, comments.